Hello, hi, my name is Lucinda Offer. I'm the Education and Outreach Officer for the Royal Astronomical Society. Welcome to Burlington House. Thank you all for being here with us in the lecture theater. And if you're joining us on Zoom, thank you also for sticking with us here for our 6 p.m. public talk. And today, let me introduce our speaker. We're going to hear about Eyes on Mars, increasing awareness of UK Mars exploration. Our speaker is Regan, and she's a final year PhD student at the Mullard Space Science Laboratory, MSSL, with the University College London. Let me try that again. She researches how global scale dust storms at Mars influence the induced magnetosphere using data from ESA's Mars Express and NASA's MAVEN satellites. Alongside her work, she is heavily involved in outreach and science communication. She was the first chair of MSSL's Outreach Working Group and is vice chair of the Science and Technology Facility Council's Public Engagement for Early Careers Forum. And coming from a non-traditional background to studying space, she is passionate about encouraging young people to pursue STEM subjects. And she has also won multiple awards for her outreach work, including one for her project, Eyes on Mars. Please welcome Regan. Thank you.
Thank you all so much for being here on a Tuesday evening, and thank you for that lovely introduction. My name is Regan, and I'm going to be talking to you about my project, Eyes on Mars, which is aiming to increase awareness of Mars exploration. So I'll quickly go back over my introduction, although Lucinda really nicely introduced myself. So I'm a final year PhD student at the Mullard Space Science Laboratory. We are separate from University College London, even though we're one of their departments, because geographically we are based in the middle of nowhere in Surrey. So rather than being on main campus in Central, we are out in the middle of nowhere. So we are quite separate in that way, but very much part of the university. My research, so my day-to-day job is studying global dust storms on Mars's magnetosphere. But what I'm really passionate about and what I do in my free time is public engagement, outreach, science communication. And the reason I do this is because when I was at school, at high school, I was told I wasn't clever enough to do physics. I wasn't in top set science. So unfortunately, this led me to believe for a long time that science wasn't the kind of route for me, that space wasn't a route that I could choose for a career. Obviously, that's not true. I'm here now studying Mars for my day job and getting paid for it, which is insane. So I'm really passionate about kind of making people aware that space is not an exclusive group, that is open to everyone, no matter whether you're seen as academically gifted or not. So I'm very passionate about encouraging more participation into STEM-based subjects, and in particular, the field of space. Now, I was the first chair of MSSL's Outreach Working Group. So this is my department. I organise multiple open days out in the Surrey Hills, and I'm working on kind of making sure that outreach is kind of integral as part of the work that we do as scientists and engineers in the department. And I also am vice chair of STFC's peer forums. This is the Science and Technology Facilities Council Public Engagement for Early Career Researchers Forum. So lots of acronyms, but this is scientists, engineers, and researchers across the country coming together to help early career researchers do outreach and public engagement alongside their work. And some more credentials, I've given multiple talks to schools, astronomical societies, I've done radio interviews, book reviews. So I like to kind of spread myself across the range of public engagement. I haven't really put myself in one camp. I like to try a bit of everything, and kind of do as much outreach and engagement that I possibly can. Okay, so that's a bit of an introduction to me. Now to the inspiration that kind of led to Eyes on Mars being created back after lockdown. So I started my PhD in 2020, which obviously meant that it was all remote. And whilst I was kind of getting to grips with what I was doing in my research, I was learning about the fantastic involvement that we have here in the UK for Mars. So in particular at the Mullard Space Science Laboratory, we're heavily involved in Mars exploration. And this was all news to me at the time. And I thought, how can I get people excited about this? This is amazing. This should be shouted from the rooftops. So I really wanted to spread the excitement that just on our doorstep, we are doing so much of the science and so much of the engineering behind Mars exploration, but no one really seems to know about it. So myself and my colleague, Priya Patel, in this photograph, we were having lots of Zoom coffee meetings because she was in America and I was in the UK when we both started our PhDs. And we were discussing a lot what can we do as PhD students to kind of get more excitement building around our involvement? How can we spread the word about what's going on in the UK? So we came up with the concept Eyes on Mars, and we applied for funding and were successful in getting 2 lots of funding from the Royal Astronomical Society's Education and Outreach Grant, and also the Science and Technology Facilities Council Sparks Award. So they managed to fund both of them managed to fund us, and Eyes on Mars began in 2021, which was absolutely fantastic. So what is Eyes on Mars? So it's a public engagement project that aims to provide educational resources around the UK involvement in Mars exploration, but in particular on the camera on the Rosalind Franklin rover. And we've done this by 2 main strands. The first is a social media platform, and the second is by providing free activity resources. But what is the Rosalind Franklin rover? So the Rosalind Franklin rover is also known as the ExoMars rover, but it's now been officially renamed to be called Rosalind Franklin. And this is a European Space Agency mission. So it's not NASA, it's not American, it is ours, due to launch in 2028 with a 2030 arrival at Mars. And on board, there are 7 different scientific instruments, including a 2-meter drill. So these are 7 different scientific experiments, basically, going to Mars, all to do different things and to find out different bits of information. Now, the 2-meter drill is particularly exciting because this has never been done on Mars before. So the Perseverance rover, that is NASA's flagship, that is there right now, only goes about 6 or 7 centimeters below the surface, whereas we're going 2 meters. So we're literally going where no human has gone before, which is very exciting, or no robot has gone before, I should say, not human. Now, this rover was actually assembled in Stevenage here in the UK by Airbus. So all of the instruments from across Europe and across the world came together to Stevenage where they were built. And the camera, which is at the very top of the mast, was built and is led by scientists and engineers in the UK. And this is the area that I'm particularly interested in and particularly want to be focusing on. So Rosalind Franklin. Who was she? Why is the rover named Rosalind? And this was actually a winning competition entry. So the European Space Agency ran a competition a few years ago to name the rover, and there were hundreds of thousands of entries from across Europe. A very British entry was Rover McRoverface, but that didn't get forward. But Rosalind Franklin did, and that was the winning entry. And Rosalind Franklin herself, this is a picture of her, she was alive between 1920 and unfortunately died quite early at 1958. But she was a British scientist that worked here in London, and she was most known for applying X-ray diffraction to DNA imaging. So she was a scientist for her whole career. During World War II, she helped research coal and coal efficiency to help the war effort. And then after that, she went to DNA imaging. And she was one of the leading contributors to help us understand that DNA was formed of a double helix type structure. Now, unfortunately, in school, and when I was at school, I was taught that 2 scientists named Watson and Crick built their DNA model, and they won the Nobel Prize. And these 2 male scientists got all the awards and all the accolades for all of their amazing work. But nowhere in their work did they write that it was all built on the groundwork that Rosalind had laid. Now, less than 100 years ago, female scientists weren't seen to be as good as male scientists, which is ridiculous. And she unfortunately died very, very young. So during her lifetime, she didn't realize the huge impact she'd had in the field of DNA and biology. But thankfully now we do know how amazing she is, and there are multiple buildings. I think there's been a meteor named after her, or a comet, I can't remember which one. Loads of awards, and the latest thing is that the rover has been named Rosalind Franklin. So it's keeping her memory alive. She was one of the key scientists to help understand life on Earth, and the rover is going to be looking for life on Mars. So it's a really nice fit. Okay, so PanCam, this is the camera that sits at the very top of the rover, and it stands for Panoramic Camera because in space we love to shorten everything into an acronym. So PanCam sits at the top of a 2-meter mast and is our eyes of the rover. This is quite a nice image of what the rover looks like. It's about the size of a small car, so they're absolutely huge, these rovers, bigger than what I thought when I first started working on Mars. And this is what it's going to be looking like. So the big black box at the front is where the drill sits, And this is mostly up to date, this image. There are a few different instruments that have changed since this image was made, but this is mostly what it looks like. Now, the camera was designed, built, tested, and is led by the Mullard Space Science Laboratory, where I work. So this is two of my colleagues, two of the engineers in the clean room at MSSL in the Surrey Hills, working on the real hardware that's going into the camera. So that is a picture of the real camera that is currently sitting on the rover. And we did everything at the Mullard Space Science Laboratory. So we not only designed it and engineered it, we were also the lead scientists on board, which is a really nice and unique position to be able to be in. So the camera itself is composed of 3 individual cameras. So at each end, the 2 circles at each end of the board are wide-angle cameras, or WACS, another acronym. And then in the middle, the larger circle is the high-resolution camera. So these 3 cameras together can do nice panoramic sweeps of the surface. They can even build up 3D imaging. And then the high resolution camera can take the really pretty pictures that we're familiar with that we get from the surface. So together, from these 3 cameras, we get a really nice view of the Martian environment. Now, what's quite nice about the 2 wide-angle cameras is that at each end, there are a filter wheel. And each filter wheel has 11 different filters that have all been designed to look at different aspects of the Martian environment. So there's 22 in total, and we have an atmospheric filter wheel and a geological filter wheel. Each filter has been designed to highlight different aspects of the environment. So in the geological filter wheel, this is looking at different minerals, different compositions in the rock to help us look for signs of life. And in the atmosphere, this is looking at things like the clouds and the dust and the water vapor to help us do science just from an image. So if you take a photograph of Mars, you can look at the same area and put different filters over the top, and you can get different bits of information just from one photograph. So just from taking pictures, we can do some really exciting science to help understand whether there was ever life on Mars, which is the overall aim of the mission. So this camera is what inspired us to create Eyes on Mars. So to kind of help spread the word about the camera and the mission itself, we did 2 main kind of aspects, the social media platform and the activities. So I'm going to start off by talking about the social media platform for a little bit. So this is the main 4 aspects of our social media. These are just the handles, which are also on the bottom of the screen. So we have mainly chosen to use Facebook, Instagram, Twitter or X or YouTube. A few people asked me why I didn't use TikTok. I actually think I'm too old for TikTok, which I never thought I would say for a social media platform. But the idea of making TikToks is really scary. So if anyone's got any expertise in that, feel free to get in contact, but that's quite daunting for me. So we chose these platforms because we felt like we were comfortable with them. Something that we're familiar with in our kind of social use, and we can reach a real range of audiences in terms of age, demographic from these posts. And it also allowed us to be able to create kind of bite-sized content that wasn't too intense. It wasn't reading a really heavy science article, but we could talk about different concepts and different ideas in short posts that don't take a lot of time for people to absorb. So some examples of our posts here. So the one on the left is just an advert for our resources, but then we've also done different campaigns across all of these platforms. So one of the campaigns we did was taking a lot of the scientific terminology and breaking this down and talking about what these words actually mean. Because quite often as scientists, we talk about things like spectroscopy and we know what it means and we kind of use it in everyday conversation. But for someone that isn't exposed to science in their day-to-day life, this can be quite intimidating. So we wanted to remove that. So we used words like spectroscopy, regolith, other terms that are used in geology and particularly for Mars research, and kind of made them seem less scary. So the spectroscopy example is there from our Instagram. And then the final campaign that we did that I'm really proud of on the right is our Space Careers campaign. So we wanted to highlight that you don't have to do physics or astrophysics to go into space. I didn't do physics or astrophysics, and I'm still working in space. And it's not just limited to STEM-based subjects. So pretty much everything you can think of has an application to space. So medicine, law, policy, communications, design, anything you can think of in everyday life has a space application. So we wanted to highlight these different career paths. So even if someone didn't feel like they could follow STEM. They still feel like they could do something else and still work in space. So we've done various different things that have been posted across our social media. And then something else we started to do, and I'll go on to say why we didn't finish this, was an interview series. So initially when we proposed this project and wrote our funding applications, we were going to go around the UK and interview all of the different institutes involved in ExoMars, and particularly in PanCam. Because although we lead it from the Mullard Space Science Laboratory, there are researchers all across the UK at the Open University, Aberystwyth, Imperial. So we wanted to go around and create short and snappy videos, basically, interviewing the scientists and engineers, asking them what their favourite Mars fact is, what their career path and things like that. So day one, we started at the Mullard Space Science Laboratory. So we had a list of questions and we interviewed myself, Dr. Louisa Preston, who's an astrobiologist, and Barry Whiteside, who is on the screen, who is one of the electronic engineers that worked on PanCam. So we had a full day of filming. We created all of our content. And unfortunately, this was early 2022. And quite literally the second we stopped filming and started talking about editing, the press release went out that the mission was suspended and the mission was not going to be launching in 2022 like it was originally planned. Now, unfortunately, this was because Russia invaded Ukraine and Russia was part of the ExoMars mission. And the European Space Agency rightfully said that we will not be working with them anymore. So the mission was not going to be going. So unfortunately, this bit of a spanner in the works. Didn't really expect to have to deal with geopolitics when working on an outreach project. So unfortunately, the social media interview side of the project didn't continue. So we've published the interviews with myself, Barry and Louisa on our YouTube, but we didn't continue around the country because the excitement wasn't as strong, let's say. But this did mean that funds were available to push more into the other side of the activity, which was the filter wheel making. So I will refer back to the filter wheel that is inside PanCam. This is about 10 to 15 centimeters across. Hopefully on the camera you can see. They're about that big in real life. And we thought, how can we bring this amazing science and engineering into the classroom? How can we make it accessible to young people that might have no clue on the background engineering, that might not have any interest in this as well? So we came up with lots of prototypes, did lots of designing, lots of brainstorming, and we came up with this. And this is prototype number 1 of our Eyes on Mars filter wheel. Now, this was made using Quality Street wrappers, and someone suggested earlier that I should maybe collaborate with Quality Street. I think that'd be a great idea. I might see if I can do that, get some free chocolate. But we came up with this concept that using coloured cellophane with 2 bits of cardboard, we can move a filter wheel around and shift it like it will in the actual camera on Mars and look through and take photographs. So we came up with this concept and did lots and lots of testing, went into a few local schools to see if this would work. And this was my guinea pig class number 1 in Surrey. And we created the activity where step by step, we create our own filter wheel and make your own Eyes on Mars with lots of different activities to do once you've got your own filter wheel. So we came up with a concept, it worked, which is always a nice benefit. And we now have a filter wheel resource pack that we've been sending across the UK to schools and youth groups. So this is what it looks like. So these are all provided free of charge by us. We cover all the postage, we cover all the cost of the materials, and we've been sending them out to schools that don't have a high science capital. So this is schools that might not have access to resources like this. They tend to have a high proportion of free school meals. And we deliberately don't send resources out to fee-paying schools. We want to send them out to schools that might not be able to afford these types of materials. So fee-paying schools, we send out digital resources, but just not the physical things. So in each resource pack, there are enough craft materials for every single student that's taking part to make their own filter wheel that they can then take home and talk to about with their parents and carers. Each student also gets a sticker, 3 free stickers, bit of a tongue twister. And if you're in the room, you are very lucky in that I've got the stickers at each side, so you can take them home yourselves. A thank you postcard for the teacher, and then templates and instruction sheets for the teacher or demonstrator as well. So everything is provided for them. They just have to do the activity. Now, the final bullet point on here is that they also receive an OCA symptom card. Now, this stands for Ovarian Cancer Action. So each teacher, we give a little bit of information and a symptom card for Ovarian Cancer Action. We don't distribute this to the children. It's a bit of a heavy topic, but it's up to the teachers if they do. Now, the reason we have done this and collaborated with Ovarian Cancer Action is because Rosalind Franklin died herself very young from ovarian cancer. So when it was announced that the rover was being named Rosalind Franklin, Ovarian Cancer Action did quite a lot of work and blogs and articles highlighting Rosalind Franklin and highlighting the symptoms of ovarian cancer. Because they're very common symptoms, but no one seems to, doesn't seem to be public knowledge what the symptoms are. Now, I was already in contact with Ovarian Cancer Action because I unfortunately lost my mum to undiagnosed ovarian cancer 11 years ago. So she had all of the symptoms that you see on the screen, but she didn't get diagnosed until after she died. So we came together and said, what can we do to help raise awareness? And they provided symptom cards for us for over 200 schools. So each school we reach, their teacher or demonstrator gets this information. So it's a really nice collaboration that I'm really proud to include in the resource pack. So those are the physical resources. Now, alongside those, we also send the digital copies of everything because you might spill coffee on it, you might lose it, and we want to make sure that you've got backups if needed. So all of the instructions and the templates get sent via email. We also include the risk assessment, which is the boring thing that we've done so the teachers don't have to. And then also a lesson plan and a PowerPoint presentation. So we've done everything we can to make it the minimal amount of work and effort for teachers to do. So all they have to do is open up the resources and they've got a ready-made lesson plan for them to do. We've also included worksheets and answer sheets. So once they've got the filter wheel, there's different activities they can do. And then if they want something a bit harder, we've also included a maths worksheet to talk about how we use maths to calculate the orbits of Mars and things like that. And then we also made some very fancy videos, which are on the screen. I won't play them, but they're on our YouTube. So I went into a fancy recording studio and did an introduction to the project and a step-by-step tutorial that was very Blue Peter. Here's one I made earlier for the teachers to use as well. So this is all sent via email and is available for them to download. And I mentioned earlier that we don't send the physical resources to fee-paying schools, but they get all of this information, so they can still take part as well. So once the filter wheel has been made, there are multiple things they can do with it. One of the things I really enjoy, hopefully it's a big image, here we go, is looking at how we can do science on Mars. So this is a real photo from the Curiosity rover, NASA's Curiosity rover, and I have hidden Rosalind Franklin's over the surface, all in different colours. So some of them probably really stand out to you, and some of them you probably won't be able to see. Probably because it's too far away, but because you need a filter wheel to highlight and make it stand out. So this is talking about how we need to use filters to make things appear to us that we might not be able to see with our naked eye. So it's bringing in the concepts of light and how light travels to our eye, which is all in the Year 5 and Year 6 curriculum at schools, and doing it in a really fun, interactive way where they can look through the different colours and see things. Okay, so that is the project. And now some data. So how many people has this reached? I'm really thankful that over 4,600 young people have taken part in this activity. So there are over 4,600 filter wheels floating around the UK. And this is a mixture of schools and youth groups. So Brownies, Scouts and Guides have also taken part in this as well. And you can see our geographical distribution on the right. Now, when I started this was very confined to London and the southeast, just because I live in Surrey and I was able to go and visit a lot in person. But as word has spread, we've been able to spread it around the UK, which I'm really thankful for. So I've delivered this in person to 10 schools. And again, these have all been in the Surrey area, just because I'm very limited on where I can get to. But we collaborated with STEM ambassadors and we trained up some STEM ambassadors to go and deliver this themselves as well. So if you're not familiar, a STEM ambassador is someone that volunteers their time. They're probably a STEM professional or student or just someone that's excited by science, and they can volunteer their time to anyone and anywhere across the country. So we had a training session with the STEM ambassadors, taught them how to deliver this. We send them the resources and then they go into schools and deliver the project for us. So again, that just takes a bit of the strain off the teachers and demonstrators. So that's been done about over 15 times so far, which we're really happy with as well. So this has been from me sending out resources. We've also had quite a few distribution networks that I wasn't expecting when I first proposed the project a couple of years ago. So the first one has been organised by a girl named Annabelle. Now, Annabelle got in touch, her and her mum got in touch because they heard about Eyes on Mars. I actually can't remember how they did, but I'm so grateful they did get in touch with me because they organise a project called STEAM Packs. And this is standing for Science, Technology, Engineering, Arts and Maths. So it's slightly different to the normal STEM acronym. And they deliver activity packs for chronically and terminally ill children in hospital in the southeast. Yeah. So these are children that can't attend mainstream schools because of their health conditions and have to have homeschooling or schooling in hospitals. So they got in touch and asked if we could send them some resources. So we sent them 250 packs of Eyes on Mars. So those have been distributed to hospitals in the southeast, which I'm really, really happy with and really proud to be part of that network. What we've also been involved in is Mars Day 2023. So this is a UK ESRO organised initiative, Mars Day and Mars Week. It's happening again this year with Mars Day happening on the 5th of March. And we sent across loads of packs on Mars Day. So there were schools across the country at the same time making filter wheels and taking part in lots of Mars Day activities. So they have a stream, and I think last year they had an interview with Tim Peake. They talked about science in space, maths in space. It's a whole programme of events that I would really encourage you to look into for this year. But as part of that, we were advertising with them, which was fantastic. Something else was New Scientist Live. So this was actually paid for by UK ESRO. So this was an extra thing we were able to take part in. So New Scientist Live is a huge event that happens at the ExCeL Arena in London, where thousands of people attend a weekend of science fun. So there is everything there from kind of bacteria to robot dogs. They had a robot taking selfies. There is just so much stuff to do with STEM that you can imagine. And they asked if we could go along as well, which we happily did. So we reached, I think, a few thousand people over 3 days. We were right next to the gigantic Mars, so we were very easy to find. And we also appeared on the New Scientist Live website, which we were really happy about. So we got loads of kids doing filter wheel activities, making them with us, and we'd printed out those pictures of Mars with the rovers hidden in them. So they were looking through, deciding which colour worked best and why. And that was fantastic, although the clear up was chaos with cellophane and paper all over the floor. So that was a bit stressful, but really, really worth it. And then finally, we also took part in the Mullard Space Science Laboratory summer event. So this is my department's summer open day, which hasn't happened for quite a few years, especially hadn't happened since COVID. So we'd organised a summer event for the public that was completely free, and they came to visit us at MSSL, and we had a kids tent full of activities. And part of that kids tent was an Eyes on Mars table. So you can see on the left, one of our students was there supervising the filter wheel making sure that they were sticking properly and not running off with our cellophane. This was great fun. I think particularly the parents enjoyed it because they left their kids with us and then went and explored themselves. So we were a bit of a nursery, but it was a lot of fun. And in particular, this photograph in the middle is my favourite photograph, I think, from Eyes on Mars, because in the right-hand side, that is the real Eyes on Mars. Well, not the real one, but that is an exact replica of the filter that goes in PanCam. We wouldn't be allowed to touch the real one, but it's an exact replica. So she's holding the real one, and then on the left, she's got her Eyes on Mars filter wheel. So it's a bit of a size difference, but you can see the science inspiring the product, which I absolutely love. So some feedback. Feedback is very difficult to get. As kind of deliverers of outreach and engagement projects, we really want feedback so we can do our evaluation, especially for funded projects. The evaluation is a really key thing in order to measure the success of a funded project. So with all of our physical resources, we do send feedback forms. So each student should be able to fill in a feedback form, but it's very difficult to enforce this. We can't force each student to fill it in, and we can't force the schools to send them back to us. So we have to work with what we've got, and we have got some feedback, which has been really, really good. It's not representative of the numbers that have taken part, but still we're able to do some evaluation with this. And in general, majority of students that take part enjoy the activity. So over 85% that have filled in the questionnaire that they enjoyed the activity. A few weren't sure, and only a tiny minority said no. So we're really happy with this. We're never going to get a 100% successful project, particularly with students aged between 7 and 13. Someone's always going to rebel. So a large amount of people enjoyed the activity, which is fantastic. And then one of the questions we asked is, has your opinion of scientists changed? So this is just a yes or no. So about a third said yes, which is good. And although around 2/3 said no, that isn't necessarily a bad thing, because within this no chunk, we also have students that said, I loved scientists before, I love scientists now. So it can be a good thing that their opinion didn't change and we didn't turn them away from science as well. So that's kind of some of the raw data. But we also asked them kind of how your opinion of scientists has changed. There's quite a lot of text on here, so I'll let you read through it, but I will highlight a few of my favourites. Again, this is just a snapshot of all of the feedback we've got. So not all scientists do the same thing. Really happy with that. We want to get away from the scientists got crazy hair and a beard and a lab coat, and that's not what we do, certainly not what I do. So I'm very happy that that seems to have resonated with them. 2 of them, I think, were maybe personal attacks at me. They're not all old. Great that children think I'm not old. That's fantastic. And then now I know that university students are professional. I don't know whether they thought I was unprofessional before we started the activity, but at least now they think I'm professional, so that was nice. And then I used to think you needed to be clever to be a scientist, but you don't. And this is what it's all about. I didn't think I was clever enough to be a scientist, and here I am. And this is what we really want to kind of drill into these young people, that you don't have to be the cleverest in your class and seem as really academically gifted. If you want to be a scientist, you can be a scientist. So absolutely over the moon with this one. So the next slide does have a lot of information on it, even more so than this one. So don't be overwhelmed. But what did you learn? Now, again, this is just a snapshot of the responses we had. I could do a whole talk going through the responses. But what we got from this question was, it made us aware that things we weren't necessarily thinking about when designing the project have come out as positive benefits. So how to cut carefully. I did not think that that would be something that would be important for this project. But when making the filter wheel, you're cutting out a large circle with smaller circles in the middle. And this is a real cognitive skill that children learn. And what we noticed, well, what we got feedback from teachers is that when we started the project, we were using cardboard as the template. So you would cut out the cardboard. But this was really, really difficult for the young people. They spent a lot of time cutting it and found it really technically challenging. And unfortunately, the teachers think this is due to COVID. Not being at school for best part of 2 years, you're not getting exposure. People might not have scissors at home. They're not getting the practice in cutting, which might seem a kind of a normal skill that most people have. But if you don't have the exposure to it, you're not going to develop this skill. So after that feedback, we changed it to just card or paper, which works just as well. But this is a skill that they're developing that we didn't even consider when proposing the project. So I was really happy to get that feedback and to help those cognitive skills as well. The UK is doing space stuff. Really happy with this, because certainly when I was young, I didn't really realise that the UK was so involved in space, not just Mars exploration. So to be able to kind of get that message to these young people was fantastic. Filter wheels can give you different information. That's great. That is the scientific aim of the instrument. So for these young children to be able to understand that is fantastic, and they can then take that home and talk about that to their friends and family as well. And then the final one I'm going to highlight is my favourite quote ever. I've been campaigning to get it as the PanCam official motto and get it on t-shirts. You don't have to see the world in one way. You can use a filter wheel. I just think that is poetry. That is beautiful. And that was written by a 7-year-old. I absolutely love that quote. And I think it's really summed up nicely, that you can see the world in different ways and be able to do science with that as well. So these young people have learned a lot from this project, which I'm really, really thrilled with. Now, to be a little bit selfish, but to talk about myself a little bit, this has meant a lot of personal successes for me as well. So I won the project award and an individual award from the Centre for Planetary Sciences last year in the summer for my work on Eyes on Mars. So this is something that I would do anyway. Getting an award is just an absolute bonus. But to be able to be recognised is just fantastic. And it's something that I can take forward with me when applying for jobs. So not only was it awarded the project award, but I was also awarded my departmental award in 2022 for an outstanding contribution to public engagement. And I believe this is largely because of Eyes on Mars. So not only has the project been successful in reaching young people, it's also been massively successful for myself. And I've gained a hell of a lot from being involved in this project as well. So what have I learnt from taking part in this project? First thing is that you've got to be very flexible when running a project like this. I couldn't have predicted the things that I've encountered along the way. The main thing was I could not have predicted that there was going to be a war. I couldn't have predicted the war in Ukraine, and I couldn't have predicted that that was going to actually impact my outreach work. Initially, we were hoping to build a big social media platform to build excitement up until the mission launch in 2022, but obviously that had to change. So we had to adapt and change where we were going to spend our money because we couldn't continue with what we'd originally planned. Now, COVID didn't directly affect the project as we started after COVID, but the impact of COVID on young people did. So I mentioned about the cognitive skills like cutting and sticking not being at the level that it was pre-COVID. And that is something we had to learn to adapt with contribution from teachers. So that's not something I was expecting. I didn't think about the impact it was going to have on young people and their education, but it's something that we had to change the project for based on the feedback we got from teachers. Now, doing this alongside my PhD is a lot. So this is not something that's to do with my PhD at all. This is my hobby that I do in my own time. So it's a lot for one person to do. So at times my time management hasn't been great and my PhD may have been strained a little bit, but it's been very rewarding and I wouldn't have changed it. But I think if I would have done it again, I maybe would have got more people on board to help me and I would maybe disseminate workload a bit better. But on the other hand, it's meant that I've developed and learned a lot of new areas that I wasn't expecting. So social media, scheduling and planning, wouldn't say I'm an expert at it now, but I'm definitely better than I was 2 years ago when I started doing this. Branding, not something I would think about either, but thinking about our branding and how that kind of goes throughout the project as well has been really important. And then something that's really important for public outreach and engagement is evaluation. For anything that's funded, you need to have a good evaluation technique and think about what went well and what didn't go so well, which is why I'm being very honest in what didn't go so well as well, because that's where you learn and make changes. So what's next for Eyes on Mars? So we've got roughly about 6 months of funding left. It could continue indefinitely, but that's just because I've got to finish my PhD and my PhD ends in a few months. So within this 6 months, we have got about 70 resource packs left to distribute. So that's 70 school classes. We've distributed over 150. So we've got a few left. And we're hoping that we'll be able to send a lot out for Mars Day 2024. So if there are any schools or youth groups listening, then do get in contact and we can send you out these resources free of charge for as many students as you have to get involved in. But once it finishes, the legacy will continue. It's not that the project will just disappear once it finishes. We're going to keep the website and all of the resources that we have digitally will be uploaded. So rather than me having to email everyone, they will all be there available to freely download. So the only difference is we won't have any materials to send out. So people will have to get the materials themselves. Quality street sales, I'm sure, will massively increase. But all the resources will be there for anyone and everyone to download. So the project can still continue even though I will not be here running it. So to summarise, we have been providing free physical resources for schools and youth groups. We've had a big reach across the UK, and our digital resources are available worldwide. Just drop me an email, I can send them to anyone and everyone. And for me, running a public engagement project has been hugely valuable, hugely rewarding, and I've loved every single second of it. I think it's really helped benefit my PhD, although my PhD has got nothing to do with this. I think the skills I've developed to run this project have really helped. And it's not just been me that's done this, there's been a lot of people behind the scenes. So in particular, I want to thank the institutes that have helped me. So the Royal Astronomical Society for all of their not only financial, but just general support in helping promote and support the project. STFC, Ovarian Cancer Action, STEM Learning, and then there's a huge list of people here that have helped, from branding to funding applications to letting me interview them. It's been absolutely fantastic. If you're in the room, you'll be lucky that there are stickers and postcards available for you to take home. If you're online, just drop me an email and I can send out resources to you. But I hope you've enjoyed learning about my project. I love talking about it, and I'm really looking forward to hearing any questions you've got. Thank you very much.
Wonderful. Thank you, Catherine. If there are any questions, I'm going to have a mic up in a moment. So I'm just going to pass it over to Nancy. Thank you for being here to help out with questions. I did want to say that Rosalind Franklin does have an asteroid. It's in the main belt. So it's in orbit around between Mars and Jupiter, which is pretty cool. It's called, let's see, 9241 Ros Franklin, if anybody wants to know.
Not only has it got a meteorite, I should have mentioned that I just named my new cats Rosa and Frankie. So I should have put a picture of them on the slides, because we also named them after Rosalind Franklin.
Hi there. Thanks very much for that indeed. I've got a comment and a question, if that's okay. The first comment is to making you blush, perhaps. You're a remarkable woman. What you have
So much.
Absolutely remarkable. And I know you thanked all the other people and they contribute as well, but it needs a driving force like yourself behind it. And I hope your chocolate sponsorship goes really well, as well as your My question is, even though you're dealing with very young people, where I suppose the gender bias at that age is different subjectively and objectively, did you notice in the feedback or the activities that young boys or young girls were dealing with the things differently, were approaching the task differently, were feeding back differently at all?
It really depended on the school I went to, and it also the time of year that I went. So I've been to a few schools since Christmas, and I don't think I mentioned, but one of the drivers that got me into science is Doctor Who. Like, I'm a huge Doctor Who fan, and having the Doctor Who Christmas specials actually helped a lot with this, because I would say, oh, I like science. I wanted to be a doctor because of Doctor Who. And they were like, oh, wow, Doctor Who, we watched that. So that helped encourage students to pay attention more. And one of the questions we ask is, what's your favourite subject? And we found a lot of the boys would say PE, and it'd be all about PE, and they weren't interested in science. And the girls were more split across the arts and the sciences. So there wasn't a kind of overall trend, but PE and gaming was something that came out really strongly from the boys, and the girls weren't as strong in preference, let's say. But the one thing that I found got the most engagement from groups that I went to was when I spoke about Rosalind Franklin and said she was a female. She didn't get recognition because she was a female. And even the boys were going, what? Like, no, because a few people would go, yeah, boys are better than girls. But most of the time it was, that's not okay, that's not right, which I was really impressed with. So once the girls heard that, they were like, oh, well, why? Like, we can do science, we could do science just as well. So that got a really nice response. But apart from that, I think especially with ages kind of 8 and 9, which is what we're targeting, the kind of split in science hasn't quite happened yet, which is why we targeted this area, because the stereotype hasn't quite reached them. They're still kind of exploring what they want to do. They don't really know what they want to do with their lives yet. And that was a thing. One of the questions was, what do you want to be when you grow up? And a lot of it was, I don't know. So that's what we want to encourage, thinking about the possibilities that you can do.
I do find it interesting, some of the feedback about not being able to, the cutting skills, because to cut paper and, you know, we always talk about people losing that ability to maybe do woodworking or, you know, design and technology, and the importance of that and working with materials themselves. Makes me think of, because we do activities here at the RIS. We do like circuits and constellations and paperwork and working with like card stock, and also conductive tape and LEDs and creating circuits and things like that. And it is difficult for them, but I'm sure I'm interested to know how well they are at, since some of them are interested in gaming, how much they're probably perfect or great on a keyboard, on a phone.
Yeah, so many of them at age kind of 7, 8, 9 say to me, "Oh, do you have to code for the rover?" And I'm like, yeah. Or do you code? I'm like, yeah, I'm not very good at it, but I do code. And I think that's what's really good about the curriculum now is I believe it is set in the curriculum. They have to do coding in primary school, which I think is absolutely fantastic. Because if someone had told me when I was at high school, you're going to spend 90% of your data time coding, I would have done IT because I didn't, and I struggled to get into coding. So I think that's something that has come across really well. And this is going to show my age. There's a game called Roblox. I don't know what it is, but it's huge in the primary school age. Everyone asks me if I've got a Roblox account, and I have to say I don't know what that is. I'm sorry. But a few students say to me, "Oh, you can code space stuff in Roblox, and you can code that you can launch a rocket and you can fly. There's like a cheating hack that you can fly in Roblox." And I think that's amazing, because you're coding something to me that is work, but you're doing it for fun. And I think that's a skill that is going to go with them throughout life. And they don't realize that is such an employable skill because they're doing it for fun, which I think is great. And there's quite a lot of outreach projects, not this one, but there's loads of outreach projects that get young people into coding, for space coding and how to code a robot moving, how to code a rover. I think it's so important because that's so much of what I do is coding. I think it's really important to get that skill into them.
And it sounds like kind of that's what, you know, I grew up from Silicon Valley, California, like technology and coding. It sounds like this is what we've created in education and teaching. This is what we wanted, but then at the same time, we don't want them to not learn some of the basic skills of coding.
Yeah.
So it's an interesting balance that we have to create there.
Yeah.
But question from our Zoom audience who wants to know, because of Rosalind Franklin, the mission was due to take off over COVID. That got stopped because of the war in Ukraine. So it's going to take off in 2028, but will it arrive on Mars when?
So it is due at the moment to arrive in 2030. Now, it doesn't take 2 years to get to Mars. It only takes about 9 months. The reason it's not going to land for 2 years is because we arrive at Mars in dust season. Now, as my science hat on, I find that really exciting because I study dust storms. So I think that's really cool. But from my mission hat, it's really bad because we don't want to send a multi-million-pound rover onto the surface in a dust storm because it will just destroy the instruments. So the plan is it'll arrive in dust season. It'll stay in orbit for about a year. And then once all the dust has settled, it will then go onto the surface in about 2030. So that is the plan. So it pushes it back another 6 years, which is a shame, but we are still happening because the worst case scenario was that the mission just got cancelled, but that didn't happen. We've just had to adapt it a lot to remove the Russian aspect of it.
Any other questions?
Hello, I'm interested about your view of life outside Earth, starting from Mars and beyond. My question is, what discoveries on Mars would be most exciting and could potentially change our understanding of the universe?
Oh, that's a really good question. So the main thing at the moment is to find life on Mars. The mission aim for Rosalind Franklin is to see if life ever existed on Mars, which is a huge mission aim. I mean, it's quite a big thing to answer. And with Rosalind Franklin, I think we'll be able to do that. So the result we're hoping for is like microbial life, because I think we can all agree there are not aliens walking around the surface. I think we would have seen those by now. So the life we're looking at is kind of bacterial, microbial, things we need scientific experiments to do. We can't see them with the naked eye. So the 2-meter drill for Rosalind Franklin is key for this. So the thing about Mars that makes it the way it is that it doesn't have a global magnetic field. So it's completely exposed to all of the radiation that's being emitted by the sun. So we're really lucky. Our magnetic field means we've got life. Mars does not have that. And there was research done that indicates that this radiation is affecting the first, I think it's 60 centimeters, that might be wrong, but definitely less than a meter. But the first 60 centimeters of crust, of soil, of rock. So that 60 centimeters is being hit by radiation. So that's killing any potential life signature. But below this 60 centimeters, we don't know. That could be microbes, there could be bacteria. We just don't know. So the fact that we're drilling below this threshold means that when we get our samples and look at them through the different instruments that are on the drill, we might be able to find signs of life. So that, I think, would be the super exciting thing, is to find microbial matter in this subsurface sample. So that would be fantastic from Rosalind Franklin. The other side is there is an ongoing mission at the moment called Mars Sample Return, which is a collaboration between ESA and NASA. So the NASA Perseverance rover at the moment is collecting samples and leaving them behind in tubes, kind of like a Goldilocks trail. So is it called? No, Hansel and Gretel trail, not Goldilocks, a Hansel and Gretel trail. So it's collecting bits of rock, bits of dust, bits of atmosphere. And the hope is by the mid-2030s, we'll have sent an instrument that will go and collect them, relaunch from Mars and bring them back to Earth. Because, I mean, our rovers are fantastic in the science they can do, but there's nothing quite as good as what we have here on Earth. So we might get these samples back and find something really exciting, like a tiny microbe or tiny bits of bacteria that we couldn't see with the rover. So that would be really exciting as well. But that probably won't be until the 2030s. Oh, it's a bit up in the air with the NASA budget. But either one of those will be looking for life, basically. So a sign of life would be fantastic.
Anyone? Yeah.
Thank you for your talk. Great to see it and interesting.
Thank you.
Slightly outside your presentation, but to do with the technical of the rover itself. Will it be landing in an area where it's known that the surface is soft enough to go 2 meters down before they put the drill in? And if so, how will they test that or discover if the rover is moving around that there isn't something underneath which will block it? But presumably that will mean you'll end up jacking the rover up 2 meters rather than going down.
That would be a sight, wouldn't it? Really good question. So there's been tons and tons of testing. So we've got extensive geological maps of the Martian surface. We know what rock type is where, and where we will be landing is Oxyoplanum, which is an old impact crater that used to be a lake as well. So there's lots of clays, which is nice and soft. And because we know the rock type, we can do analogues here on Earth. So we've got similar rock types in laboratories, and the team in charge of the drill have tested whether the drill can go through rock types and things like that. And the drill is also very slow. Like it's not speedy. It will drill very, very slowly. And if it does encounter something that's too hard, rather than the rover lifting up, it will just stop because they don't want to risk breaking it. So it's always a better safe than sorry type scenario with these instruments. We don't want to risk damaging anything.
Thank you for your talk. Congratulations. It's been very, very nice. I have two questions. First of all, as a scientist doing a lot of how do you say this in English? Vulgarization or outreach. Have you felt the pressure from your science colleagues as like you should be doing science in your PhD, concentrate on publish, do your research work and so on and so on. I mean, this is as a scientist that has done as much outreach as possible as I have had the possibility, I did. So, I mean, if you do this during your PhD, this may be a hard pressure. I have a second one. When the STEM effort started, so to improve the percentage of female students in science, technology, and maths and engineering, it was not a STEAM, so the arts was not there. What is your feeling about this integration of arts? So it's something that we should also support and enforce?
So to answer the first question, I personally haven't had much backlash on the amount of time I put to public engagement and outreach. I've been really lucky in my supervisors for my science career. They really see the value in public engagement and do a lot themselves. So they've been extremely supportive. And although sometimes there's conversations of maybe you're doing a bit too much, you do need to remember your PhD, which is completely understandable. They've been nothing but supportive. My main supervisor helps with the entire concept of this, and he is the principal investigator on PanCam. So that's been hugely valuable. In terms of wider though, in my department, we're facing a big issue at the moment in a lot of students are being told not to bother with public engagement, not to bother with outreach, just focus on your PhD and don't do all of this other stuff. And being part of the STFC peer forum, it seems to be an issue across the UK, particularly since COVID. A lot of students are coming in and being told, don't bother with that, put your head down, publish, just do your PhD. So it's something we're really trying to battle. I'm really trying to battle it in my department, and we're trying to show that public engagement is not only good for the community, for the public, but it can also help yourself. So I have won awards for this, and my public speaking, I think, is widely due to the amount of public engagement I do. I think before I did public engagement, I would be a ball of nerves standing up here talking to people. But because I have to answer school kids that come to me and say, what's a black hole? And I don't know, I actually don't know what a black hole is. I'm not an astrophysicist. I have to think on my feet. And if I can handle a class of 37-year-olds, then you can answer difficult questions from high-up academics at conferences. So they really go hand in hand. And personally, I've not faced it, but it is a huge issue we're facing in the community, and something that public engagement professionals are really trying to battle. So that's question number one. Question number two about STEAM. So I mostly am for STEAM, so including arts in science, technology, engineering, and maths, so including the A in there. And I think it's really important to include it for the intercollaboration and the networking of all of those areas together. So not only have I displayed engineering and science and a bit of technology and maths in this as well, but the filter wheel itself is quite artsy. I mean, you're doing an arts and crafts project, and you can take really pretty pictures with it, which is arts. So I think it's really important to show that they all go together hand in hand and they're not separate subjects. The only thing I will say is that I believe the arts in school don't have as much of an issue. This is completely my opinion. I don't believe the arts have as much of an issue in getting people to take part and get involved. I believe STEM still has a gender disparity. a socioeconomic disparity. So I think that in that way, STEM should be separate in the encouragement. But for careers and outside of school, I enjoy it all being together.
Last question.
Can I just make a comment? Your last question there,
Mhm.
and that is that art isn't art, it's the arts. So there's humanities, there's anthropology, there's all kinds of things which are scientifically related. And they all interact with what one would normally see as scientific issues and studies. If you look at just purely art and you end up including design, design means incorporating technology, science, mathematics within an aesthetic as well. And then there's the handling qualities of things, the way you use things, the study of human factors and things like that. So it can't be separated. And I was at a talk just before the first lockdown when a previous head of the Research Council, chairman of the Research Council, came to give a talk. 3 days later, he was on television as part of the panel that was advising the government on the COVID situation. So that lockdown was not known at the time he gave the talk, but it actually was called a couple of days later, which was really funny. But one of the things he said in his talk, which was to do with STEM, and he said, we don't call it STEM, we call it SEED. And that was the Research Council. So it was already part of the higher echelons of thinking in those areas. And as my life has been actually bridging between the two, the arts and the sciences, I have no argument with it at all because it's just so blatantly obvious.
Yeah. Think of everyday life as well. Everything is completely combined. And that was why we did the Space Careers schedule because, Space Careers program on social media, because yeah, it's not just you could do any type of career like law and policy with space. So it's so interdisciplinary.
The other thing is that we don't think it's right to expect 7-year-old children to really have much idea about what they want to do.
Yeah.
Because their life experience is so small and short in relation to what they. And very often you don't find things until you meet people and talk to them and discover things like TV or in real life or whatever. So I think it's crazy to think, oh, I want to be a train driver, I'll just carry on regardless for the rest of your life.
Yeah. It was a very popular career for 7-year-olds as a train driver. So
It pays very well.
yeah.
Obviously, oh, sorry.
I was going to say, if a train driver might help my trains go on time, which would be good.
Obviously, a very interesting talk, Catherine. Thank you so much for being with us. Thank you to our audience, both on Zoom and in the RS Lecture Theatre, for this wonderful talk. Have a good night, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Oh, thank you so much. I really appreciate you coming. Thank you. Hi, thank you. My name is Dr. Ellen. I brought my 9-year-old. Oh, fantastic. It's so because I went to science. Oh, fantastic. I'm history. Oh, brilliant. So I run a science workshop. Yeah, no, please. Yeah.